All right, so for the people that are really in a hurry, those are the settings that I'm using. You can copy paste them, but if you want to see the whole reasoning behind those values and how I use them, feel free to stick on the video. Welcome everybody, my name is Arthur, and today we are going to talk about font sizes. I'm going to show you a simple way to get started, a good base on which to build your project, and hopefully a proper understanding of the technique that I use and why I use them so you can adapt my code to your needs. But before that, this video is sponsored by the like button, so if you ever get some value out of this video at the end of it, make sure to like it, it really helps. And without further ado, let's jump in to the code. All right, so I've defined here headings and a paragraph, and we'll see how, in my opinion, you should be tackling the issue of sizing your website. So by default, we'll see that Chrome is actually defining the H1 as 2 EM. It might be different on different browsers, but usually it's the same convention, meaning that block is going to be, the font size of that block, H1, is going to be twice as big as the parent block. Which might cause problems if for some reason the body is a bit bigger, smaller, and just like confuse everything. So we are going to look at this problem and we're going to change some units. But first of all, we're going to look at pure sizing. The H2 is 1.5, H3 is 117, H4 is the same size as the paragraph, it's not set, so it's 1. H5 is 1.83 and H6 is 1.67, and I'm going to write those here so you have like a reference on those. So here 183, this one is 1, this one is 1, this one is 117. I don't know what that comes from. Oh, from here. This one is 1.5, and this one is 2, and they are all EMs. All right. So this way you have like a proper understanding of the whole of the default from your browser. So all of this is fine, and this is what website I've been using for a very long time. This is the default. If you don't do anything, this is what you get. Now there is a slight problem, and I'm going to bring my trusty calculator here. Is if you look at each step, it's not the same amount of transformation. So for instance, going from the H4 to the H3, this one is really easy to calculate. It is like a 17% increase in size in between those two steps. But if you go from the H3 to the H2, so in my case, this one divided by this one, we see that actually the increase is more about like 20%, 28% increase. And if we do the same calculation, 2 divided by, now it is like 33% increase in terms of sizes, meaning that each levels in the hierarchy is not strictly the same increase in size. It's close, but it's not quite there. And usually when you talk about this problem with people like specialists in typography, they will most likely tell you the scale needs to be the same increment in between each level of the hierarchy. So we're going to look at this and look at how we can fix this very easily. So I am going to use a CSS variable because in that case it's going to be way easier for my expose, and I'm going to call it the ratio. And this is really going to be the ratio in between each step of the scale. So going from H4 to H3, H3 to H2, H2 to H1 is going to be the same increase in font size or the same decrease if you talk about H5 and H6. So one ratio that is really popular is the golden ratio, and it is 1.6180 approximately. And this is a ratio that is supposed to be extremely pleasing to the eye and really convey like a strong meaning of hierarchy. So this is what we can use. And we are going to start with the H4, which is unstyle. So in that video here, I'm going to use rems as font, like as a unit to define my font sizes. If you're not familiar with rems, I will link in the description a video from Kevin Powell that explained what kind of CSS unit you can use, and specifically for typography, my preference is always rems, but he's going to explain that part way better than I can even do. So let's go. So here we go, font size, if I can type it, it's going to be 1 rem. And the same is going to be true for the paragraph. And here we are going to go up 1 step. So now we are here, we can invoke the count function, and the count function really allows you to do operation on 2 values that don't have the same units. So it's really interesting in our case, because it's going to be 1 rem multiplied by our ratio. Here we have the ratio. Let me do it. And now you see this one here, the heading 4 is going to be 1 rem. This one is going to be 1.6180 rem. And I'm going to actually remove this one and set this one is 161. And we'll see for the other ones. Okay. And now we just keep doing it. Sadly, there is no power function in the default CSS. So we're just going to multiply it twice. And here I go H1, and we're going to multiply it thrice. There we go. And I'm going to remove all of the values because those are not true anymore. Here we go, here we go, here we go. And remember, here in my screen, I'm extremely zoomed in. So I'm actually going to zoom a little bit out. Hopefully you can still see everything. I'm going to grab this one here so you can still see everything. And we're going to do the exact same thing, but now for the decrease scale. So it's going to be for the H5 and the H6, except we're going to replace this one by a divide, this one by a divide, this one by a divide. All right. So now, if we look at this, each step is the same increase because we use the same ratio. So it's going to convey like a very strong meaning of hierarchy. So this is great. If you're asking me, the golden ratio is a little bit too extreme of a scale. So what I like to use is actually using the root, the square root of the golden ratio, which goes for 28, if I'm not mistaken. And now we have like a very nice hierarchy, very nice scale. The smaller headings are not too small, and the big headings are quite big, but not too big. All right, so this is the relation I usually use in my project. But you might want to use a different ratio. If you want to use 50%, that's just fine. I usually find this one pleasing. And one cool perks that you get from this one is if you go 2 steps, you get the golden ratio back, because this one is the square root. So multiply 2 square roots together and you get the root of that. So this is supposed to be still pleasing, and in my experience, this is a very nice ratio. So up to you to decide which one you want. But I would recommend this, and I would recommend that way of writing everything. Using rems, yet again, see Kevin Powell's video in the description. And multiplying with the ratio. So if you're not pleased with that ratio, you can just change it very quickly and just go in and just say, hey, I want 138. and there you go. Okay, so now there is a second question of we're using relation of the root font size, but how should you define that root font size? And my personal take on this one is you should use what's called fluid typography, and I've done a whole video on this already, so I'm going to link this one as well in the description. But basically it goes and say, I need to just define my font size. And this is the clamp where you define the minimum. So in my case, it's 12 pixel. Then you define a scaling function. In my case, it is 0.5 viewport width. 75, doesn't really change anything. I'll make my pixel, for instance. And then you define the maximum value. And this means that as the screen is going to expand, the whole typography is going to increase or decrease depending on which side you move. If I typed it correctly, yes, should be. There we go. Okay, it doesn't move. Let me viewport width. Oh yeah, that's plus here. Sorry, my mistake. Okay, so as I'm gonna de-zoom a little bit. As you go smaller, the text is gonna shrink a little bit, and as you go bigger, the text is gonna expand. And the reason why you would want something like this is really just you want to have like slightly smaller text on smartphones, for instance, as on bigger screen, and those values are usually the one that I recommend. Now there is a gotcha. And the reason I don't finish the video on that screen is there is one more thing. And this is just being nice to the users. And here, rather than using pixels, I am going to use percentage. And it might sound a little bit weird, but let's say I'm going to use 66%. This one I'm going to use 133, and here I am going to use 137 pixel, which is very, very close to it, except I need to remove this one. Okay, by the magic of edit, I'm second try. Okay, so I'm going here and I'm going to use percentage. So the reason I use percentage is really to be nice to the user. And here I need to actually use percentage here and be respectful of users that want to set their default as different from what the browsers are. So here we see we have the same behavior. As you grow, the text grows. But I am going to zoom back a little bit. So at the bottom, you'll see this one is the same with pixels. And this one is the same behavior, but with percentage. So here I am going to call, for instance, this one with percentage, and this one I'm going to call with pixels. There we go. And you're going to see the difference real quick. Okay, so the default setting for Chrome is 16 pixel as the font size for your website. And here, if I go into my settings, I'm going to go down a little bit and you will see here I have a font size option. So let's say I'm a user that has difficulty reading small letters. I can use that functionality of most browsers to change my default size. So for instance, I would want to have like very large text in my website because I have trouble reading. Or let's say I have an extremely small screen that is like right in front of my eyes. I want to have like smaller text. If you use pixels, as you can see here, so here is the one with pixels, basically you are overriding the default of the browser and you're just like forcing your values over the default the browser. But if you're using percentage, you're actually letting the user define what is the base text, and you just say, hey, I'm gonna need smaller than normal or bigger than normal. And this goes a little bit deeper if you customize the fonts itself. Some user will want to have like minimum threshold for their font. So this one is going to be fine, but you see it's this one, the default, that really is important. This one is the base value. And as you can see, basically, if you use percentage in your font sizes, you're going to be respectful of the default settings that the user defined in their browsers. So some people have disabilities, some people have preferences. And usually on the web dev, we try to cater to the preference of the user as much as possible. So that's why I personally am using percentages. But for instance, if you think you can decide better pixels and better values than your users, then go ahead and use pixels. I would use percentage. And this is the solutions that I'm going to advertise as my values. Those are all of my opinions and all of my values. You might want to have different ratios. You might want to have different min value, max value for smartphone, bigger things and everything. So yeah, I'm gonna set my value back to 16 pixel. And yeah, and I'm gonna zoom a little bit out so you can see my whole value here. And yeah, hopefully this video was helpful to you. And I had to touch a lot of different things regarding font sizes, but I think this is like a good cover of, in general, the rules of typography in terms of font sizes that you should be following. And yeah, if this video was really helpful to you, make sure to leave a like. It really helps. And if you have more questions, feel free to reach out in the comments, and I'll be hopefully able to help you. So yeah, have a good one. Cheers.